2 primary conferences down and 1 more to go. Xbox and Sony have now wrapped things up. Nintendo is going to be happening very soon. I'm looking forward to that. We'll probably talk about Nintendo, but it'll just be with like a picture of Mario, except it won't be Mario because that would probably get copyright claimed as well. Let us talk Sony, guys. It is really late here. When I realized the Sony conference was at 9 p.m., I was like, oh, I thought it was earlier than that. Well, it's gonna be a late night, because I want to get this out so a bunch of you fine folks who maybe wake up tomorrow after work have this video ready to rock and roll for. And you know what? The Sony conference showcased some really cool games. They've given me energy. I can make it through this. So why don't we start by just briefly talking about the conference itself. It's a bit of a mess. Sony was like, hey, look we put everybody in this hot box of a tent because we wanted to set up for The Last of Us 2. This guy with the banjo, he sounds real good. He actually did. I love music. The banjo guy was fantastic, and we all know who he is actually. I wish they would have just done that and then like put everybody at the main stage, because then there was like this 15-minute period where I was like, just show The Last of Us 2 gameplay again. We'll watch it twice. I've shown trailers 16 times in a 20-minute video before. People will watch it. Just put it on the screen again. And instead it was just some people talking with audio problems. It was a weird transitional point. It was like you're wasting time. But honestly, I could care less about like how the conferences actually play out. Like, I like seeing real devs there, and there were bits and pieces of that. That always makes me happy. But I'm of course there to see the games that all of these wonderful devs have been working on. So, The Last of Us 2 opens up very, calm, serene. Let's showcase Ellie's character again. She's now a little bit more grown up. Let's just kind of lay into her character, lay into her story, and then boom, let's get into the dark stuff. Like, really, really dark stuff. Showcasing combat, gameplay, and the much darker tone that we got to see with The Last of Us 2 trailer. In this case, demonstrated very clearly as we watch a man get tortured and then have his entrails torn out from his stomach as he's hanging from like a light post. It's grimy, dark stuff. They're not messing around with the violence. They're going all in. Let's just put it that way. I don't have a problem with it. It's just like, yeah, they're taking it very seriously, that setting. There's no doubt about that. The thing I really want to talk about is a lot of the gameplay content that we saw there in The Last of Us 2. A lot of the animations. There's just some really incredible changes you can see within that gameplay footage. First and foremost is the fact that Ellie doesn't have to turn around to walk backwards. So this is something that third-person games do all the time. Like, if it's third person and the camera isn't locked, a la Gears of War, if you're playing Uncharted, The Last of Us, Just Cause, your character turns around and starts to run towards your camera when they turn around. You really have no control over their ability to walk backwards in any of these games unless you're like ADSing down the sights, and then you can walk backwards. We actually see Ellie numerous times walk backwards without rotating herself, and I love that decision. I think the whole idea of a character turning around instantly and running towards the camera is something that just feels like, yes, I'm playing in third person. I get that we are, and like there's nothing that's going to happen that's going to break that feeling of I'm playing in third person, because you are. But the idea that there's something being done there to give us a little bit more control over the character's movement and to maybe give us a little bit more immersion, totally on board with that. It looked great. There's a bunch of new animations for, like firing weapons in different positions. It seems like we'll be able to crawl under some vehicles to hide now. And in general, the game had some of the best looking grass I have ever seen in my entire life. Like, is that going to be in the full game, Naughty Dog? Because I don't even know if, like, the PlayStation can handle that kind of grass. That was impressive grass. The grass, however, though, ties into some of the combat that we saw and some of the factors that now play into combat that really impressed me. First and foremost, it seems that we can take on multiple opponents, at least, I guess you could say, in a more controllable sense. I'm imagining it's still going to be difficult, but the fact that we can do it and that the combat and the movement system and like the stealth system is built around taking on multiple targets quickly and not having to like kill one, wait 20 minutes, kill another, I think is going to be great for the pace of the game and just the overall fun factor of actual combat. Because Last of Us 1 combat for me just felt, especially in the harder difficulty, it was way too much like sit there, kill someone, okay, just throw something. I mean, the AI in The Last of Us, the first game, it's not really good. It's if you've seen videos on it, it's one of the things the game doesn't have a strong grasp on. It doesn't stand out on normal difficulty as much, but when you go to hard, it is noticeable. This looks like a huge improvement, although a lot of this was probably a little bit more scripted combination of gameplay. Nonetheless, again, the setup seems there, and one of my favorite things is the ability for Ellie to seemingly lose, like, to get separated from the people tracking her a little bit more easily, to basically break line of sight and to force them into a situation where they're now trying to find her again. I mean, unless an individual in a situation like this, adrenaline's pumping, you've got tall grass, you've got dark buildings you're hiding in, unless that person has a direct line of sight on you, the idea that you have to run a million miles away to break their knowledge of where you are is something I've always hated about games when they do stealth. So being able to take a shot from someone, run into a building, hide in that building, and have that person not know where you are in the building, that's like next gen, man. Games don't do that. Games are like, well, the AI saw her run into the building, so they know exactly where she is inside of the building. They know she's hiding inside of locker C on the right side, 10 feet from the far back wall. You know, she was actually able to jump over that counter and actually hide, and then use that throughout the rest of that sequence to engage in combat. We also see a particularly detailed situation where she slides between two shelving units to take a flank after a woman who is wielding a bow. Like, stuff like that is, you don't realize that maybe, but that means that when they put that shelving unit down in game, and when they put shelving units like that down in game, and when they create gaps in the world that Ellie can fit through, they have to make sure those objects are separate, that, you know, there's an opening there in the geometry that allows the player to go between them. That's an extra level of detail that takes time, that takes, you know, effort, and that's really cool. You know, that adds to the overall feel of the world, and that pushes us further and further into the future, where it's like, I want to go everywhere I could go in the real world just because I think it'll add to the gameplay experience, and that seems to be what they were pushing for there. So just so much cool stuff going on in that gameplay demo. I want to know how much of like the reaction stuff is real, like Ellie getting shot and having an arrow sticking through her. It was actually a mechanic. She pulled the arrow out and kind of healed herself, so I'm thinking that's something that can actually happen. Arrows being far more potent and dangerous this time around, and acting as sort of a physical object that can wound and keep Ellie in a wounded state. I love that. Man, I love that. I love that about Naughty Dog, to be honest. While their games are really powerful on the narrative front, they do often implement some pretty badass gameplay content stuff, so I'm really stoked on that. We've now talked about that for 8 minutes, so let's move on to Ghost of Tsushima, which is, of course, Sucker Punch's open-world samurai feudal Japan game. We get a little glimpse into the story here. Honestly, the only big thing I want to say about this game is that I'm super freaking stoked for it. Like, just take my money. I don't need to know more. I'm willing to risk it on this one because it looks amazing. And that audio-visual presentation, I guess you could just say the visual. We didn't get to hear too much audio, but the visual presentation for that game, the color palette, the aesthetic, the use of wind to just bring the entire environment to life, it really did present itself. You know, I will just say aesthetic here. The atmosphere and the aesthetic of the game, like nothing I've ever seen before comes close to that game. It just stood out on its own as like, that looks unbelievable in a way I haven't seen things look unbelievable before, if you know what I mean. It was really genuinely impressive, and we do get to see a lot of gameplay in there. It looks great. I mean, really, it just looks great. I definitely want to see more, and I'm definitely interested in playing it at some point whenever it does finally release. Moving on, before we talk Death Stranding, because I want to talk about that, let's hit on some of the other smaller things, I guess you could say, that we saw at the conference. So Kingdom Hearts, a lot of you are going to be excited for that. Nioh 2, we didn't get to see any gameplay, but the fact they're making a second Nioh is awesome. I wish I had the time to play the first game. Kind of makes me sad. I didn't even get to play the first one, so maybe I'll just play the second one. We got to see the Destiny 2 story with the whole Kate is dead thing. Yeah, that's a big deal. People are going to be talking about that for the next month probably. Spider-Man was there. Looks as fantastic as ever. Honestly, Spider-Man's another game. I'm just like, yep, $60. Put it in my PlayStation, Sony. Put it in my PlayStation, Insomniac. I'm playing that shit. Resident Evil 2 remaster. Yeah, I mean, I grew up with Resident Evil. Some of my first survival horror games. I will be just absolutely blown away at the chance to play Resident Evil 2 again with like a RE4 camera and stuff. It's going to be dope. Control. This is a pleasant surprise. I did not expect to see Control there. This is Remedy's, as in Max Payne, Alan Wake, Quantum Break's latest game. It's going to be multi-platform, by the way, PC, Xbox, and PlayStation 4, so don't be concerned that it's an exclusive. We'll all get to play it. And it's like a full-blown supernatural third-person shooter with reactive, destructible environments. Here's the thing I like about the story, what we know about it right now. You're going to be playing Jessie Faden. So she works for like a bureau, right? And there's some crazy stuff going on with cryptic ciphers and strange bureau experiments, and that ties into a supernatural world. So you actually have a supernatural combat. You have supernatural combat. I mean, that's the part of the game. You have abilities, upgrades. There's gonna be loadouts that are based around those supernatural abilities. It also all takes place in a diverse environment with shifting architecture, as they say, in a deep, unpredictable world set within the sprawling New York building. One New York building. I love the idea of that setting. We're so obsessed with open world games, and like, why not have a game that takes place in a New York building? Why not basically have, Die Hard if it took place in New York City? I love that. And, I'm really hyped about this. I love Remedy. I'm just hopeful that they can learn from, I think, the shortcomings of Quantum Break. Quantum Break had a lot of cool ideas, a lot of cool mechanics, but the gunplay was not satisfying. It was not fun to do again and again and again. And that is exactly what makes Alan Wake such a great game and Max Payne such a great game. It's the fact that they do so many other things really well, but that core loop of shooting stuff in those games is out friggin' standing. I mean, the flashlight, shoot a guy, flashlight, shoot a guy, bullet jumping, obviously, all of that stuff's really good in those games. Quantum Break just didn't have that, so I'm hoping these supernatural abilities and the gunplay, they can kind of take some of the stuff that they were touching on with Quantum Break and make it satisfying here. I'm hopeful for that. I love Remedy. It's another game I'm going to buy regardless, to be honest. All right, Death Stranding, Hideo Kojima, Kojima Productions. A whole lot more of just a big old mindfuck, if we're honest. But we do actually have a little bit of narrative now with Death Stranding. We know that Norman Reedus' character is sort of a blue-collar guy in this world. He's not a superhero. He's not a special individual. He's not Snake. He's not any of those characters. He's a dude who runs deliveries in a really messed up and really disturbing and really strange, and I have no idea what's going on world. At one point, it even appears that he's delivering dead bodies. He's a delivery guy. And he delivers stuff in a harsh world that leaves his body looking pretty rough, man. And there's also some crazy beings that exist like in a dimension where you can't really see them, but they're totally there, and they're made out of black goop. The babies are there again. The rain, which is called like timefall, totally will mess with you. It's like it'll just screw things up. And there's a mention in the dialogue of like, if you die, you'll come back, but the world will be changed. The crater won't be there. So I don't know, man. This just sounds absolutely nuts. And by the way, it's running on their Decima engine, which is something they're building with Guerrilla Games of Killzone, of course. And it's on the PlayStation 4 Pro in 4K in real time. Kojima said that like the beginning section where we see him kind of traveling around, and then the end section is like the closest thing to gameplay with some small changes to the camera. So like that's sort of the perspective we're going to get in third person. It's just a matter of figuring out like what is going on with the story and the characters. They introduced couple new female protagonists. It's just it's like, what? Here's the thing about Death Stranding. I don't need to see any more of Death Stranding. No, I don't. You don't need to show me it. Don't show up in 3 months, Kojima. Don't show up in a year and show me this game. Just let me know when the release date is there. Okay, that's maybe 6 months, 7 months, whenever you want to say it from now. Let me know when it releases, because I'll pre-order it, which is not something I recommend you do with most games, and I will have it preloaded on my PlayStation 4, and I will play it day one without a doubt. And I don't care how much it costs me. Honestly, that's kind of the theme of a lot of the games for me personally at E3 this year. Like growing up, I just bought games based on like, wow, that looks really great. I want to play that. Here's the story, here's the premise, and I went with it. And there's just still games that come out that are like that for me, where it's like I'm gonna buy them day one. I won't pre-order them in most cases, but I will buy them day one. Like I will buy Death Stranding day one. I will buy Ghost of Tsushima day one. I will buy Control day one. Sometimes games just come out from studios with ideas and concepts that just grab you in a way that you just don't really care if they end up disappointing you long term, because you're more than willing to make that $60 investment and take a risk on it. I mean, I could spend more, buying alcohol. I don't drink, so there's money that would have been spent on wine or something, now spent on video games. Like, it's just some of those games fit into that slot for me. E3 has had a lot of this. That's honestly the point I'm at with Anthem. Like, I'm not going to pre-order Anthem, but you can bet your ass I'm going to buy it day one. Because just the things I've seen for that game, it doesn't need to necessarily, like, hold me for 1,000 hours. Like, if I get 100 hours, if I get 20 hours out of it, it'll be $60 worth it for me, just because I love where they're going with, like, the movement system and the mobility. That's kind of been E3 for me this year. We'll see if Nintendo can keep things rocking and rolling with that. Hopefully we'll see like some Metroid. I would love to see an Animal Crossing on Switch. If Animal Crossing came to Switch, not only would Michelle lose her mind, but I would totally lose my mind. I'm gonna go to bed now. Actually, I gotta edit this. I gotta cut all the video together. That's probably another 2 hours, and then I'm gonna go to bed. At which point it'll be 2 o'clock in the morning. Hopefully, all of you fine folks will get to watch this tomorrow and enjoy it with your breakfast, on your lunch break, or later in the afternoon. Either way, I'll see you tomorrow for some Anthem discussion in regards to the game's story and some of its characters that we now have information on. Thank you so much for watching. You're all beautiful and wonderful, and I will see you in the next one.
You have been brought here for a purpose, the most important task of your lives.